Today I'm going to start the new lecture on the comparative government and politics, and this is the last lectures of these units of comparative government and politics. That is the introduction part, and here I am today going to discuss about the constitutionalisms in comparative politics. That means we are talking about the constitutionalisms, and this is very important parts of the comparative politics. Constitutionalism is a fundamental concept in comparative politics that refers to the adherence to a systems of constitutional governance that limits government powers and ensure the protections of fundamental rights. It involved the study of how constitutions are designated, implemented, and upheld within the various political systems. So that means कि here I'm talking about the constitutional is a kind of new kind of the concept, and when we're talking about the constitutional, that means कि a kind of the limited governments. And constitutionalism is a fundamental concept in the comparative politics that refers to the adherence to a systems of constitutional governance that limits governmental powers and ensure the protections of fundamental rights. It involves the study of how constitutions are designated, implemented, and upheld within the various political systems. Key aspects of constitutionalism include there are different aspects of the constitutionalism, and one of the important constitutionalism aspects that is called the rule of law. When we're talking about the rule of law, that is constitutionally emphasizes the importance of the rule of law, where government power is constrained by legal norms and principle. This ensures that government actions are predictable, transparent, and accountable. That means कि when we're talking about the rule of law, nobody is above the law. Either a common persons or each persons or highly educated, all are in the eye of law, treat equals, and all persons, all citizens have equal vote value. So this is called the rule of law, and rule of law is very essential aspects within the constitutionalisms. So this is very important parameters that are formulations of the constitutionalism. Next, we call separations of power. Constitutionalism advocate for the separations of powers among different branches of governments like the executive, legislative, and judicial to prevent the concentrations of powers and protections individuals' rights. These systems of checks and balance ensure that no single branch become too powerful. That means कि when we're talking about the constitutionalism and second important aspects of the constitutionalism, that is separations of powers. And separations of power is very important things. That means कि there must be power will be separate and equal. All executives, different legislature, and different judicial persons hold different kind of the power. Not all power concentrated within the one persons or one institutions. That means that those persons who are formulating the policy, they can only formulate the policy, they cannot execute. And those there is some kind of the dispute between the governments or between the persons or between the government and persons, there is for the separate organs that is called the judiciary. If one persons are persons who is leading executive, legislative, and judiciary activity, there may be chances of the absolute corruptions. So this is the second important parameters where we can see constitutionalism is very important things, and these important aspects can be fulfilled through these separations of power. And where separations of power is in the real manners, there are chances of the good governance, and good governance leads to the some kind of the substantial result. So this is also very important aspects of the systems. Next is called the protections of the rights. That means that when we're talking about the rights, and constitutional typically include provisions that protect individual rights and freedoms, such as freedom of speech, assembly, religions. Constitutionalism ensures that these rights are very important aspects, and constitution ensure that these rights are upheld and cannot be arbitrarily infringed upon by the governments. That means there is chances of protections of the people. That means ki we have the fundamental rights, some kind of the directive principles of the state policy. So unless our peoples have not given the some kind of the rights, peoples are cannot feel secure. Their rights may be some kind of the withdraw. Sometimes a state may be withhold their rights. So through the fundamental rights and fundamental rights, right to assembly, right to practice assembly, right to preach, right to movements, right to freedoms, these are very important rights for their developments of individuals, persons, and these can be achieved through the some kind of their given the rights by the constitutions. And protections of right is very important. And these rights are given within the fundamental frameworks of the rights, like to right to assemble, right to move, right to speech, right to religions, right to practice, and all the things. So these are very important concepts of the protections of rights and within the constitutionalisms. Next is democratic governance. Democratic governance is also very important part of the constitutionalism in the comparative politics. Constitutionalism often involves the establishment of democratic institutions and process, such as free and fair elections, to ensure that government authority is derived from the consents of the governed. Democratic governance is very important aspects of the constitutionalism. When we're talking about the democratic governance, that means key peoples are treated equally. No persons are treating unequals. There is no any kind of the unequal treatment by the different kind of the parameters, like the educational level, like on the basis of their incomes, like on the basis of their genders, like on the basis of color, or like on the basis of place of birth. So these are very important things. And democratic governance, all citizens have equal vote value. That means ki either rich persons, poor persons, educated, uneducated, on the basis of genders, on the basis of their physical challenges, every persons have equal vote value. And democratic governance have some kind of the accountability. That means ki who are rulings, who are in the government process. There is must some kind of the accountable governance. They cannot only take decision on implement, but the decision implemented through some kind of the accountability. There is also the some kind of the transparency. So this is democratic governance. Democratic governance is also not the for the a long period, but for the some kind of a tenure based 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. May after some government who is providing the good governance, then people again select or elect the same governments. But that government is not for a long term, but depending upon their performance, their delivery of the goods and services. And democratic governance is also a holding that is transparency. Also, the holding transparency, that means that they cannot hide all the activity of the state or government. Look, peoples must know about the government decisions within the framework of the times and all the things. So this transparency bill we can implement through the Right to Information Act. Another kind of the democratic governance, that is time-bound services, that is also called citizens charters. And citizen charters is also important in the sense that services are delivered within the framework of the times, unless or until peoples are people are not given the time bound services, there is no relevance of the services. So these are the important factual things through the which we can say that this is very important part of democratic governance. Now come to the judicial review. Constitutionalism has some kind of the judicial review, that is constitutionalism include mechanisms for judicial review where courts have authority to interpret the constitution and invalidates law or actions that violate constitutional principles. This ensures that government actions are consistent with the constitutional law. That means the constitutional judicial review, when we're talking about, there is somehow when governments are making the some kind of the policy programs, that policy or program must be within the framework of the constitutions. That means that if government are not formulating policy and programs within the constitutions, that can be come under the preview of the judicial review, or that law or policy may be scrapped by the judicial systems or judicial institutions. This is come into the part of the uh, judicial institutions. So that means the government is not supreme, parliament is not supreme. Who is supreme? Supreme is constitutions. That means that all work either through the governments, either through the executive legislatures, or through the judiciary. All work come under the preview of the constitutions, and this is very important part of the constitutionalism. Comparative politics examining how different countries implement constitutional principles and how constitutionalism shape political behaviors and outcomes. It explores the effectiveness of constitutional framework in promoting democratic governance, protecting rights, ensure political stability. So these through the different kind of the parameters, judicial review, rule of law, democratic governance, and all the things will cover into the comparative constitutionalism in the comparative politics. That means that when we're talking about the comparative politics, there is one of the core value of the comparative politics, that is constitutional values, their ethics, their practice. Ultimately, who is supreme? Constitutions, not executive, judiciary, and legislatures are supreme. What are the challenges before the comparative politics? There is so many challenges before the comparative politics. That means that we are study or doing the, some kind of the research within the framework of the comparative politics. We have not exact data because there are so many vast country area, and this is very important challenges before the comparative politics. Another kind of the challenges before the comparative politics, that is there the analytical explanations. That means we suppose we are getting the data. Some institutions they are hiding the data. They are not discussing in the open manners. So this is also important challenge of the comparative politics. So these are the important challenges before the comparative politics. And here one of the important concept, especially in these units, constitutionalism and comparative politics. Yeah, constitutionalism in the comparative politics. That means ki what is the value of constitutions in the comparative politics. And constitutionalism is very important aspects, not only in comparative politics but other politics also, because constitutions have some kind of the issue the guidelines. Constitutions is a, we call a supreme legal documents, and through the constitutions, all the persons, either executive, legislature, or judiciary, who are bounded within the constitutions. And these rule of law, here we're talking about the rule of law, that is constitutionalism. That means constitution emphasizes the importance of the rule of law, where government power is considered by legal norms and principles. This ensures that government actions are predictable, transparent, and accountable. That means that through the rule of law, every person have equal rights, every person have equal access in the state resources, national resources, and there is no unequal treatment on the basis of color, caste, creed, place of birth, and maybe political opinions. And this is very important government actions that create transparent and accountable. Next, separations of power. Constitutionalism advocate for the separations of powers. among different branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicials, to prevent uh, the concentrations of powers and protect individual rights. These systems of checks and balance ensure that no single branch become too powerful. That is very important parts of the constitutionalism. And separations of power essential for the good governance. Suppose any state or any nations where one persons are holding most of the powers, either executive powers, legislative powers, or judiciary power. That means that those states are not functioning in the proper manners. There may be chances of the fail of the states. There may be chances of the civil war. Maybe chances of the lead of the corruptions. Today we have different kind of the lack of the constitutionalism. That means there is already existence of the separations of powers like the executive, legislative, and judiciary, but there are still exist the some kind of the nexus between the politicians and criminals, nexus between the politicians and the corporate groups. That is also called the crony capitalisms. So these are is not good for the constitutional parts. There is already clear cut. That means there is some kind of the competitions commissions that are also healthy competitions within the corporate group, but still they are practicing the some kind of the crony capitalisms. Now come to the next, that is protections of the human rights. When we're talking about the protections of the rights, and rights may be on the two types. One right that is called the fundamental rights or political rights. Political rights like the right to vote, right to participation in electoral process. But when we're talking about the human right, that means that those rights are availing on the basis of human beings. And fundamental rights are within the nations, within the states, but human rights that is availing in the area of on the basis of universalism. That means that human rights are not binding within the states or within the area, but this is the universal concept. Every persons who are humans, they can avail the human rights. And constitutions typically include the provisions that protect individual rights, freedoms such as freedom of speech, assembly, religions, and constitutionalism ensure that these rights are upheld and cannot be arbitrarily infringed upon by the governments. So this is very important parts of the protections of the human rights. Next is that is democratic governance, and when we're talking about the democratic governance, that is constitutionalism is often involves the establishment of democratic institutions and process such as free and fair elections to ensure that government authority is derived from the consents of the governments. And democratic governance is very larger concept. That means when we're talking about the democratic governance, that means there must be participations of the citizens, and these participations from the electoral politics to after the for in the formulations of the public policy, and there must be some kind of the popular governments, and democratic governments have some kind of the free and fair elections, and authority exercise their power in the neutral way. They cannot favor a particular persons or institutions. So these are the very important parts of the constitutionalisms, and we can achieve these constitutionalism through the providing the democratic governance. Next is that is judicial review. And judicial review constitutionalism include mechanism for judicial review where courts have the authority to interpret the constitutions and invalidates law or for actions that violate constitutional principles. This ensures that government actions are consistent with the constitutional norms. And comparative politics examining how different countries implement constitutional principles and how constitutional shape political behaviors and outcome. It explored the effectiveness of constitutional framework in promoting democratic governance, protecting rights, and ensuring the political stability. That means that these are very important parts in the comparative politics with the reference of the constitutionalisms. And through the constitutionalism, there may be chances of the state behaviors in the good manners. A state can deliver the good and services in the proper manner. They functional in the well manners. If constitutionalism is not exist, there may be chances of the lead of the corruptions. There may be chances of the chaos. There may be chances of the conflict. That means that there are a large numbers of challenges if there is absence of constitutionalism. There may be challenges like the leading of the leading in the society of the conflicts. Society maybe face some kind of the conflict process. They are not believe or trust in the rule of law. There is no belief in the government decision making and all the things. There may be chances of the increasing of the civil wars. There may be of chances of the chaos in the society. Then there is essential thing a state run in a smooth manner must be follow the constitutionalism. So this is important parts of the constitutionalism, and constitutionalism is a like we can say is a very powerful instrument for the proper manners of providing the governance. So this is very important chapters of the constitutionalism. This is the last unit of the introductory part of the comparative government and politics. And today I'm going to the wind up of these units. Thank you.